Okay, let's get started. So I'm Munseob, Assistant Professor of Economics at the University of California, San Diego, and welcome to the joint webinar between the UC San Diego and Seoul National University. So the organizer from SNU, Professor Jungmin Lee, is joining us as the panelist today. So before introducing today's presenter, Professor Hyunjoo Yang, so let me introduce two other webinars we are planning to do the next week and in a few weeks. The next week, next Monday, the US time, and Tuesday, the Seoul time. So our own, Professor Stefan Hegert, will introduce the Ankit Panda, who is the Senior Fellow in the Nuclear Policy Program at Carnegie Endowment for the International Peace. So they will have an in-depth conversation about strategic stability and extended deterrence on the Korean peninsula. This is the next Monday. And in a few weeks, the November 7th, the Monday US time, and the Tuesday, the Seoul time. So we will have Professor Jongkan Lee from Ewha Women's University talking about do low-skilled immigrants improve the productivity and worsen the local amenities, the learning from native mobility responses in South Korea. So you can always find the information about the webinars from the gps.ucsandiego.ucsd.edu/KPP. And this webinar is being recorded and will be posted for later viewing at the same page. Okay, so without further ado, so let me introduce today's presenter, Professor Hyunjoo Yang. So Professor Yang is Associate Professor at School of Economics in Sogang University in South Korea. And he's also affiliated faculty at Graduate School of Artificial Intelligence at the same university. His main research interests are development and growth issues of the South Korea. And today specifically, he will share his research and his thoughts, opinions, and views on the empirical investigation of South Korean economic history using spatial data and machine learning. And this series has received the general support from the National Research Foundation of Korea. So Professor Yang will share his research for 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, we will have, again, 25 to 30 minutes, the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave questions on the Q&A box. So if those are clarifying questions, I will deliver right away to Professor Yang, or I will deliver the set of the questions during the Q&A session. And Professor Yang, thank you for coming today, and floor is yours.
Hello, thank you for invitation. Let me share my screen. So let me begin. So today I'm going to talk about a concrete example of how I use spatial data and machine learning to investigate some of the research topics that I have on South Korean economic history. So the motivation is that economic history, empirical analysis can be quite difficult. And one of the important reasons is that it's very time-consuming and labor-intensive to construct historical microdata in order to answer some of the empirical questions you have. So, this presentation, as I mentioned earlier, that I'm trying to give you a concrete example how the spatial data and machine learning can be used when I'm interested in the impacts of Korean War, which happened 70 years ago. And I was asked by the organizer that the target audience is mainly students interested in applying these GIS or machine learning for research. So I'm trying to give you more detailed information more on the what kind of data that I use and how I process them, so on and so forth. So for this talk, the underlying research question is this Korean War that happened between 1950 and 1953 had persistent consequences in rural villages More precisely, what I'm interested in is whether there was a less improvement in village public goods 20 years after the war. So, well, technically, the war has not been ended yet. It's still technically it's at war because there's no formal ending of the war. But then most of the fighting was happening around this time. This is one example. The North Korean army is advancing to South Korea during the Korean War, and I'm interested in whether these specific attack routes taken by the North Korean People's Army or NKPA during the Korean War had an impact on nearby villages. That is my question. This is from the map by the West Point U.S. Military Academy on Korean War map. The red arrows are where the North Korean armies advanced during the first month of Korean War. So as you can see, the North Korean army took various paths through Seoul and also through the Gangwon-do on the east coast. And then eventually they advanced toward the Busan. So there are a lot of qualitative evidence on the impacts of the attacks. Okay, so they document stronger conflicts in communities near where this North Korean army attacked. So near the NKPA's attack routes. And some examples from the qualitative literature, a major reason for many deaths of anti-communists was due to specific roads NKPA advanced. And another one, NKPA went past our village like wind, and the peaceful daily life of our village was destroyed. And now you might wonder, so what happened when they passed by nearby villages when the NKPA advanced through the roads, and then what happened to the nearby villages? One reason was this what's called as People's Court. If you can read Korean, you can see it here also, 인민재판. So there's People's Court. So this is sort of like an ad hoc court. Okay, so you can see the North Korean army here standing back. So whenever they advance through the local communities, well, not always, I shouldn't say, but often they went to the village and they asked the village members to identify anti-communists. And then often they asked the villagers themselves to execute the village members who are accused of as anti-communist. So you can imagine that what kind of the conflicts that this can be caused, right? So basically, within a village, all of a sudden you have to take sides, whether you are with them or not with them. And then sometimes there's this kind of executions happen. So a lot of the historical documents say that this People's Court massively destroyed this social capital within the village. So what I'm trying to do is to quantify this exposure to the North Korean armies, and also the impact of this 20 years later, when the village people had a chance to cooperate each other to improve their village well-being. Okay, so in order to measure, so now I'm trying to think about the measurements here. So now what I'm interested in is the specific path the North Korean army took, and then I'm trying to see how close villages are, right? So presumably, if you're close to attack routes, then you will be more likely exposed, and there will be more likely people's courts held there, right? So the exposure to NKPA requires the detailed road network before the Korean War, right? I need to know where exactly the North Korean army came down, and also I need to know the village location, right? Because you need to know the distance from where the North Korean army came down from each village. Then you need longitude and latitude of the village, and where the roads are where the North Korean army came down. So these two fronts, well, there's no existing data available, so I had to construct these two. So first, road network. The road network, I used the pre-war, so that's before 1950. So I found these very detailed maps made in 1918 by Japanese colonial government at the time. So I georeferenced. So the meaning of georeferencing is that this is a printed map, and then I put the we can attach the longitude and latitudes for this map using GIS software called QGIS, which is an open source, and anyone can use it. So georeference all these maps, printed maps, so that the I can digitize these roads. So as you can see here, this is Wonju in Korea, Wonju. Actually, this is where my mom was born in 1954. Maybe it's too much information, but so she was born here, and this is Wonju city, and she used to go to a church in a nearby village. So I showed this to my mom, and then she liked it. Anyways, so there's a roads, so which I'm trying to digitize, right? So this is, so there, you can see this map contains a lot of information, right? So there's like hospitals, also there's what else? Schools, so on and so forth. But here, what I was interested in is the first class. So this is second class, and this is first class. First class roads. So I'm trying to digitize this road network, okay, through using QGIS. And the way we do this is to manually, you can just use a QGIS, load the maps, and then click it, okay? Click, so the red line is actually where the North Korean army came down. So the way I constructed this, just click all the roads. So, you know, basically clicking the roads here, right? Like this, and then it will be what was called as a line vector in a GIS software. So you do this all, you know, it takes forever basically. So my back hurts and my eyes are tearing. So I had to find some alternative way to do this. So recently I managed to do this using the machine learning. So let me explain a little bit about the machine learning part here. So the task is very simple. So I just clip all these images into very small the map clips like this one, right? And then what I do, well, I can do this manually. Just put as 1 if there's a road within this map, or 0 if there's no. So here you can see there are roads here, right? So this is 1, and this is 0. So I can do this manually, but this kind of simple task, so which is called as image classification. You classify images into either 1 or 0. This is something that machine learning can do very easily. I clip all these maps, and then I use the machine learning to classify these, and then the results are like this. So you can see all these small purple squares, right? So these are each clipped images. So if the machine predicts this as 1, or there's rows, then it'll be purple color. And then the white ones are no rows in that map clip. And also I classify the highways as well, which is a red color. So these yellow lines here are the highways as of 1970. So as you can see, well, you can do this manually, but it takes a lot of time. Whereas if you can do this with the machine learning, it takes, I think, well, clipping takes much more time than actually predicting them. Okay, so just to give you a brief explanation on what machine learning is here is that classical programming is that you as a programmer set the rules, and also you input data, and then it'll give you some answers, all right? Whereas for machine learning, you provide data as well as answers, and machine learning will automatically find the rules to go from the data to answer. So for example, in this example, I give the machine learning, the machine, the image, which is input, and also the answer, which is 1 for this case, and another image, which is this one, and along with the answer, which is 0. So I gave the machine about 1,000 images with the answers, and the machine will automatically find the rules in order to classify any images to either 1 or 0. So the rules are basically, so what I use is the image classification, the convolutional neural network, or CNN, which specialize in image classification tasks. And the input, so here the input, if this is, let's say, input, and also the answer is the, let's say, gender, then this will be, let's say, female. And then what the machine will do in the training stage is to trying to figure out the rules, right? So it decomposes the images into lines and noses, eyes, and the face shapes. And then in the end, this trained network will give you a prediction, which is the, let's say, male or female. Then the beauty of this machine learning technique is that we don't have to figure out the rules here, because as I mentioned earlier, the machine learning will figure out the rules themselves. So actually implementing this is not that difficult. I learned this when I was 40 years old, right? So from the scratch. So you're like half of my age, right? On average, except Professor Lee and sorry. So it's the codes are not that difficult to actually write. You can just copy and paste. If you're interested, email me. I can give you my codes as well. Very easy. It doesn't take that much time. You can see the 7. So, training model takes less than 1 minute for the task that I did. You can use the Google Colab, which is the basically the so this is you can use if you want to do machine learning, you need to have used to be fancy computers with expensive parts. Now Colab will provide you the free computing resource. You can just write the codes there just as if you can write this in like a Google Docs, and then you click the play button and it'll just run the program, right? So no need to have a fancy computer anymore. Anyone can just open the Google Colab, which is free, and then you can train CNN models. So I worked with several graduate students at Sogang here, and then now they're doing better than I do. So this is one example. My grad student, Sogang, is going fancier here. So instead of just classifying this into either, there's a road or not, he actually extracted the lines from the map. That's what he did. So using extract the colors and then all this fancy technique, which I'm not sure how he did it. For me, it's like magic. But now it's much more, accurate now, right? Or another student, Im Young-jung, we work with maps in Africa to predict the population density in 1950s using the maps. So another machine learning application here, using the US Army maps that's available worldwide. So this is the South Korea in 1945. This is Seoul, which used to be called Gyeongsang. And for those of you who knows Korea, there's a Apgujeong-ni. This is Lee village, Apgujeong-ni. And there's Jamsil-li, right? Can you see that? Jamsil was a Lee, and there's a paddy fields. So, well, if you had that land, right now you won't be here, because this is the Gangnam district, the fancy Gangnam district now with the probably one of the most expensive rental places that you could find. Anyways, so you can use this detail maps, which is available worldwide for doing this kind of prediction. All right, so moving on to, so now, I digress too much, but so what I was interested in is to build the road network as of pre-1950, and then we could use this kind of a GIS plus machine learning technique to automate them. So another difficult thing was to find the location of the villages as of 1970, because in Korea, we don't have pre-existing data on the coordinates of each villages. So again, lots of mouse clicks. You can do it manually by looking at the maps as of 1970 using QGIS. Click where the villages are, but there are 33,000 villages in South Korea as of 1970, so it's very hard to do. So here, another shortcut I try to use is to, this is administrative big data. There's a building database that's publicly available through this website here. It's a 주소. 주소 is address in Korean. And they provide monthly universal buildings, the data set of South Korea. So what I meant by that is that they provide this kind of, so this is GIS data again, a shapefile, vector data, the shape of the building and the name of the building, the type of the building, and how many stories underground, and also there are a lot of information for each building. So the entire list of buildings are included in this this data set. So here I only exclude the village facilities, and then I match them with a name. So here, this is a 장곡 마을회관. 마을회관 means village hall, and 장곡 is the name of the village. So typically, these village halls contain the name of the village. So if I can merge this name with my list of the villages in 1970, I can easily locate the location of the village, right? So that's how I did. So here, there are about 1/3 of the villages I already located the locations, so about 13,000. And I did it this way, not doing this manually, but by utilizing this building data set, which can easily identify the central location of each village. So here, as you can see, right, here, village itself is residential places here. And usually the village hall is located in the center of the village. So this is very convenient as well. Okay. So by digitizing the road network, I think there's a question by Professor Kwon.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, thank you very much. So my question is the, I guess, definition of the village. And then I think if I understand it correctly, then you are trying to compare the impact before and after the war, no? Or how the path dependency remained after the war. But I guess like if we use the 70s map already, then that's an outcome of the war. So so how should we incorporate this effect of the war on the notion of village?
So the exposure is as of 1950, but the outcome that I was interested in is as of 1970. But it's still a cross-sectional data. Ideally, if I have, let's say, the level of public goods as of before, let's say, before the war, and after the war, then that would be ideal. But unfortunately, we don't have that data. So now it's a cross-sectional with an explanatory variable as of 1950 and outcome variable as of 1970. Okay, so so that's for the explanatory variable, that's how I do it. So I have about 5 minutes. So let me skip some of the interesting historical events I'm trying to say. But anyways, for the outcome variable, that's the improvement in the village public goods. Here I use a government publication, which is called 새마을 총남. And here, if you flip the pages, you'll see that there's a list of villages, and also there's some classification of villages into whether they improved public goods or not. So I digitize all these manually first time. Also, it's very painful. And then I switched to outsource all these to an Indian firm. So it took me more than 6 months for 6,000 villages for digitizing. So meaning putting all this information in an Excel sheet. Whereas Indian firm could do this in all the villages in 3 months. Anyways, so these are the preliminary results. Well, using township level data. So I haven't started using the village level data, which I'm trying to do sometime this year. But the township is the one admin unit above the villages. So what I see here is that well, if your township is closer to where North Korea came down, you are less likely to improve public goods. That's the initial preliminary results that I have, which I'm trying to use village level data to confirm. The final part is what about the some other control variables for this study? So here, these are the list of the control variables, but let me talk about these and I'll stop my talk. So the elevation, how high on average your township is, and what kind of soil types that you have in your village. So these are all coming from the worldwide GIS data. So the elevation is what we call as a raster data, which is a pixel unit data. So I aggregate this using QGIS. At the township level, with a command called the zoning statistics. And this elevation data is freely available again from USGS, what is S? Geographic. Yeah, sorry. USGS is a US government. They provide a lot of geographic data, and they provide this digital elevation data, which is the resolution is 1 pixel covers 30 meter by 30 meter worldwide. And also the soil types, these are from the FAO. They provide this digital soil map of the world. Here you can see that it classifies the land into many different type of the soil types, which I also use the QGIS and zonal statistics to aggregate at the township level using township boundaries. Within the township, I collect the statistics, basically, what kind of soil types are there, and I use it as a control variable, okay, which is also freely available. So let me stop here and get the comments and questions. So I'm trying to give you a concrete example of how this kind of difficult task of time-consuming and labor-intensive task of constructing historical data can be replaced with more skill-intensive using GIS software and machine learning to help the constructing historical data. And so my experience was that actually working with many graduate students with these projects, actually just instead of just asking them to manually doing these tasks, if you ask them to use machine learning and QGIS to do these things, there's an external benefit here because now they gain this useful technique or tools, and they apply them for their own research. I think that's one thing that was very rewarding for me when I see them actually doing even better than I do in many of the things that related to GIS and computer machine learning. And then my final goal is through all these things that I do with historical data, I'm trying to construct a basic Korean economic history microdata platform, so that many interested students can actually download the data and then use it without going through all this painful process of constructing data. So let me stop here. Thank you very much. I'll I'll stop.
Okay, thank you, Hyunjoo, for sharing a fascinating project that uses the multiple historical microdata and up-to-date the machine learning techniques to study the important question in economic history. The recent development of the data science opened up this opportunity for social scientists to revisit the old and fundamental questions. And then today what we have seen is the great example of it. And I'm personally very excited to see the micro data platform as the potential user as a researcher working on the South Korean economic development. Okay, so for audiences, so you can read the questions on the Q&A box. So if you go to the Zoom, so at the bottom, at the center, there is the Q&A box. So if you click here, you can read the question. So then I will deliver that question to Professor Yang. Okay, so let me start with the one question, and I will first open the discussion to the panelists. So the one question I have is, so could you restate the hypothesis you had from reading the discussion in the history? So was your preliminary result consistent to your initial expectation, or it was the opposite direction?
That's a very good question. So the Korean War, usually in the existing literature on conflicts, there are actually mixed results. Some say these kind of conflicts can actually increase, let's say, cooperation, because now they're facing some common external enemy, which is in this case a North Korean army. So, you know, in many African studies, actually can improve conflicts. External invasion can actually improve social capital within communities. In some other papers, they say in the long run there won't be that much impact. If you think about the Solo model, you know, when there's a initial disruption in, let's say, capital, the marginal product capital will go up, so that in a couple of years, then it'll go back to the previous steady state. Whereas some other papers, like Nathan Nunn's paper on slave trades, if there's an event which can actually destroy social capital within, disrupting, you know, the corporation, then there can be also negative impacts. So I didn't have the sign of the expected sign here, because it can be, well, many people can die out of people's court. Maybe within community, it might become more homogeneous, because many anti-communists can be killed or kicked out. So maybe this can be actually helpful in cooperation, which is a sad story, but that can be also a possible story. Whereas what I actually found was that the conflict remains, and then you know, it can actually lower the cooperation 20 years later. So I thought that this could be an empirical question, actually, because existing literature show all the mixed results.
Okay, great. So we will get question from Delaney and then move to John.
Hi, can you hear me without too much of an echo? So my question is, well, first of all, have you ever seen the movie Taeguki or Brotherhood of War? Okay, so I was just thinking about that movie when you were talking about this, and many villages, including Seoul, actually had retaliatory, it went back and forth, right? First, people were killed for being anti-communist, and then they would be killed for being communist. And a lot of times people were just signing their names to eat, right? To get rice. So my wondering is, was there any look at whether villages had more of this back and forth, or were you just looking at the DPRK court at this time?
That's actually a great question. So actually, there is this saying at that time, during the daytime, it's the Republic of Korea, during the night is North Korea, for example, because a lot of North Koreans are hiding in the mountains, and then they came down during the night. So many communities, they suffered doubly, basically, as you mentioned. They were suffered when the North Korean advanced, and also suffered when the South Korea reoccupied the region, so that they also trying to identify who are the communists, actually. So trying to answer this question, in the end, it comes down to whether you can find the reliable data. And then actually I went through there's actually police reports to the US military government at the time where the police report where all the North Korean armies are hiding. And then when they trying to attack them, they had this daily police reports reported to US military government. And then I'm trying to also digitize them and see whether there can be more actually. So what you're saying is a heterogeneous effect. Some of the communities might be even strongly affected because now there's another round of attacks. So yeah, I'm interested in this issue. It's just that it'll take some time for me to digitize them. And if you're interested in, please email me. Email is already in the chat window. I desperately need more research assistance.
Yeah, I was actually interested sort of in the UN intervention in the Korean War. And, I think your hypothesis that the People's Court played a role in sort of changing the allocation of public goods. But I think that a lot with the bombing operations by the US military would likely target these strategic routes. So I was thinking maybe have you accounted for that as a potential control variable when running your regression?
Well, yes, that's also a very good question. So let me share back the slides. So the United Nations actually intervened, and as you can see, this is what's called as a Nakdonggang line, where there's a really heavy battles between the North Korea and the UN command. The UN wanted to protect the Busan, the second largest city. And as you can see, North Korea is trying to capture them. So in my another paper on New Village movement, I actually control for these by basically creating a vector, GIS vector along this Nakdong line, and then calculate the distance of each village from this line to capture the potential impact of the battles. And also there's also another map in Korean War, which shows 10 or 20 major battle sites. And for that paper, I also include them. So I find the longitude and latitude of these major battle sites, and then also control for the distance from these major battle sites. And the bombing, a lot of bombing actually happened near Incheon because of General MacArthur trying to recapture Seoul around this time. So I think in terms of bombing, probably this would be where the heaviest bombing would occurred at the time.
Okay,
the short answer is
Professor
that I'm trying to control these. Yeah, I'll do that.
All right, if I may ask a question. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much for this amazing initiative. And then as a Korean urban economist who always is interested in this growth, it has been always a trouble to find historical microdata. And then I think Professor Yang is making this big step forward. So I really, really appreciate it above all. And then because I am Korean urban economist, so I get questioned a lot that what made this Korea successful in terms of the growth. And the other question that I get a lot is why Seoul is still Seoul. So it's so close to the North Korean border. And then why, even though there was a threat of the war, why the government never tried to move the Seoul away from the border. So I guess it's related to more heterogeneity. That do you see different impact if you see the heterogeneity closer to the border versus far away from the border? That's the first question. And the second question is about the data that you are planning to provide this data platform. I hope it to be more annually frequent and also more micro level if that's possible. So this is almost like it would be great if you can work on this and then if you can add more granular level of the data, and then I just am very thankful. And the final comment is like the Ukraine. I know a couple of professors who are working with Ukraine development project, and the Korea actually is regarded as a great example post-war development. So this urban researchers are interested in Korean war development as an example of a successful Korean development. So I hope I really think I am thankful for you to make this initiative. Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot of big questions here, but the first one, what makes Korea grow so fast? Well, this is really a big question, actually, but the way I'm trying to attempt this question is, of course, I'm looking at the rural development and well, infrastructure, the like highways or electricity probably played a really big role. So what I'm working on now is the impact of the electricity access and how that helped the rural villages in 1970, because before 1970s, not many villages had electricity access. It was really dark at night, and then all the villages wanted to have electricity so that they can watch TVs, they can study at night, so on and so forth. And I have this annual data on which villages received the electricity access from 1970 up to 1978. So I can have this kind of annual expansion of the electric access in the village. So I'm trying to look at that. So which is more of a micro study, but then I have a variation on the infrastructure access. And the second question was about whether I can make the data available annually or as a panel. Well, I'm struggling with the cross-sectional data constructing as well, but you're asking even more. But using the maps, I cannot do it annually, but in many of the data sets, I can do it maybe once a decade or so. And the third one, so the nature of the data that I'm trying to construct is the problem or the headache when you are trying to construct a panel data set is the changes in administrative boundaries over time, which it's hard to track even for Koreans, but for many foreign students or researchers, it will be even harder because you have to look through the history and you have to, so that's very hard. So what I'm trying to do is to make the data set as a grid level or GIS data so that it'll automatically, if it's a gridded level data set, not the administrative level data set, you don't have to worry about changes in boundaries, because basically what you have is a panel data set at the grid level. So I'm trying to construct these and then to make these available so that people don't have to do another processing, tracking all the changes in boundaries. So yeah, I think there will be answers to Professor Kwon.
Okay, thanks. So, Jongbin, yes, we go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I have attended Professor Yang's presentations a few times on machine learning and his this data construction project, and I'm always very much impressed by his work and his effort. That's probably because I'm too old for this kind of new technique, as he said. So I admit that. But anyway, so it's very, very interesting work, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing more research from his data. I think there is a big potential, as Professor Kwon said. The economic growth of Korea is a very interesting topic, but we don't have. I think that we don't have a great data set for this kind of data research. Anyway, so so my question is more specific. Probably I have asked this questions before, but so you are looking at the routes of North Korean army took, and so the natural question is, so I think that they actually chose the roads, the optimal route for attack. So it's not random. So you should probably you probably have already looked at the selectivity of this route. So have you like so this question is related to John's questions before. So for example, like so also this is also related to the Munseob's question before. Because it's also related to the mechanisms. So is it so? You may think there's two questions. There are two questions. One is the endogeneity of the North Korean Army's route, and the second question is mechanism. Is it a destruction of the physical capital because of the North Korean Army's attack, or is it really the destruction of a social capital? So that's, I think, more difficult question. But let me ask you those questions.
Thank you very much. So the endogeneity of the attack routes. So then we have to think about what is the original plan when they invaded South Korea, and then also I trying to look at these, and there's a book by a Soviet general who was part of this invasion, General Razubayev, I think. But the plan of the North Korean invasion to South Korea, the way they trying to choose the routes is to capture the major cities, so Seoul, and then so I think it's better to show the map and then talk about this. So the plan was to capture Seoul and all the major cities along the way and headed toward the Busan. That was the initial plan. So to my knowledge, what they didn't consider trying to convert communities as they advanced to South Korea, to convert them to communists. They didn't have that kind of objective. The primary goal is to capture cities and go to Busan as soon as possible. So if that's the case, then my identification relies on the fact that, so let me show you some more. So let's say there are villages here, right? And then the way North Korean Army came down in a small regional scale, for the village here and there, this village is sort of more of exogenously receive the exposure to North Korean Army if the red color is where North Korean Army came down, compared to the another village here. So they have access to the national roads in a similar distance, let's say village A and village B, but due to the North Korean Army came down this way, which is, we might argue it's exogenous to what the villages looks like. So that village did not receive that much impact from North Korean Army, and this village had a more impact. So that's the identification that I rely on. And but I can actually test whether this distance from the North Korean Army is exogenous or not by looking at the correlation with the village level characteristics with my variable that I'm interested in, the distance from the North Korean Army's attack routes. So I run regression for so these are all the individual regressions where I put my control variables here and my explanatory variable here, and delta will capture how endogenous my explanatory variable will be if you look at the observable characteristics. And as you can see, in many of the variables, demographics and education, geography, there are not much correlation. Of course, there are some correlations here, like the size of the town and distance from the river. But then in many cases, there are very little correlation. But there are very strong correlation with the distance from the major cities from each township, which is very consistent with this General Razvaev's plan, where the attack route should be trying to capture major cities and go to Busan. So those villages near these major cities, they have a strong correlation with the attack routes. And the second question about the mechanism, well, that's also probably one of the weak points. Well, there are many weak points, but one of the weak points, how I can explain this mechanism, well, at one point I tried to work with my friend who's doing a field experiment to do some field experiment in these villages, whether there's like the experiments which can capture the cooperation. So I was trying to do that, which stopped because of the COVID-19, but maybe I should think about that again. But as for now, because there's very little village level data sets, it's somewhat difficult to actually tease out the different mechanisms, whether it's a capital or whether it's a social capital story. But I think this is a first step in trying to understand the micro impacts of Korean War on communities.
Okay, great, Hyunjoo. So I want you to leave a few minutes at the end, to ask your advice to faculty and students who are joining us from Korea and the US interested in this quantitative social science, especially in the historical context. So for, say, remaining the 5 minutes, so could you provide your general thoughts on where students should start from if they want to work on the new emerging exciting area?
So I don't want to be what's Koreans call 꼰대. So that's not a good word, but well, from going back to about 10 years when I was a first year PhD student, I had the same concern. Well, I was interested in South Korean issues, but then in trying to decide what to do, well, actually, I read a lot of the newspapers in 1970s, 80s, and because I was interested in South Korean growth, as the Professor Kwon mentioned, but I didn't know where to start. But then I came across this really bizarre policy experiments which is called a New Village Beautification Project. So at the time we had the military strongman called Park Jung-hee, who distributed the cement bags to every village in South Korea unexpectedly. And the village people, they received this free shipping cement bags, and then they had to do something out of this cement, building like infrastructure. And I was very interested in, so why do some villages use the cement to actually improve village public goods where some others didn't? So that was like the beginning of all these projects that I'm working on now. So maybe finding some historical piece that you can come across through Google search or all the other means, and then maybe you can start with that. There might be one way to begin your project. And also there are a lot of low-hanging fruits, actually. I'm not sure whether it's low-hanging fruits, but many people ask me, South Korea, the land reform was very successful. So what were the impacts? And then I'm trying to look for all the existing literature, but I was not able to find much. So, there are a lot of topics that people are interested in, but if you dig deeper, actually, not many research has done. So land reform would be another example. or the industrialization. Well, there are some work, including Professor Munseob Lee. So industrialization was also a very important topic in South Korean growth, where the now people are begin working on that. So in my opinion, probably it's partly due to a lack of easily accessible data. There are a lot of questions that people are interested in but hasn't been answered. So you can, as a graduate student, you can go small scale. My PhD thesis, I only used a single province for doing the study. I couldn't cover the whole country because there's so many villages. So maybe starting small scale, but trying to answer some of the questions, important questions, could be one way to do it. I don't know. That's my opinion. I don't want to be Conde, so I will stop.
That's so great. I mean, it's so inspiring that you found the really interesting, the historical event, but we have a less understanding about it during your PhD. I mean, back then you didn't have the fancy machine learning techniques, but once you are excited about the topic, you are able to find a way to collect the data to test your hypothesis. Is it the right interpretation?
Yes, that's right. I also had a lot of struggles trying to find these data sets, but yeah.
This is great. Thank you for sharing your story, because this is something the students cannot really see because they only see the outcome of the research. So they don't see the struggles behind that.
Okay, one more thing I want to say.
Oh, sure, please do.
Sorry,
yes.
But well, I have some projects actually on Korean economic history, including land reform. So if you're interested in, please email me. My email address is already there, so we can have more discussions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So as a timekeeper, so I hate my role, but I need to close the meeting. So thank you, Professor Hyunjoo Yang, for sharing your up-to-date, fascinating research project, along with your personal story, how you got there. And thank you all the panelists and audiences joining us. So we will have another SNU UC San Diego joint webinar in early November. So you can check that information either from the Korea Pacific Programs webpage or the SNU Economics webpage. Okay, so thank you all and have a good night or good morning in Korea. Bye-bye.